Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Filippos, and this is Martin, and we are the creative and the technology director of OutHere, which is a small VR and AR studio in Sweden, working solely with these technologies for the past 4 or 5 years. So a while ago, a few years ago, we actually started working together with Skanska, one of the biggest construction companies in Scandinavia and maybe in the world, to devise together an exploration, a program to see how we could utilize virtual reality to work with the safety training program. So we made a program called Step Into Safety, the virtual reality training. So it's generally safety in construction sites is a huge issue. It's a really big problem. I mean, there's people dying and people getting hurt all the time. Skanska is actually a world leader in terms of safety. They invest very heavily, and they have all kinds of programs about how to counter that, and they really have a really great record. But at the same time, it's still a massive problem, and of course there's families can be incredibly affected by it, lives are lost, and the cost of it is immense as well. The first steps we took is to actually look into how do companies work with safety training in construction, and we find out that we're still operating on, let's say, some kind of archaic mode. So we still use these kind of information panels. We ask questions. We just show diagrams. In a way, we were saying it's a bit like taking a driving test without actually doing the driving. You just have the theoretical aspect of it, and obviously that didn't really apply into the real world. So then, like I said, what we explored is how can we utilize virtual reality to see if we can make something there, as virtual reality was coming, into everyone's minds and lips, and then we were starting to see things that were becoming very interesting. So, and maybe I should make this clarification, at really no point did we consider 360 video VR. We just basically directly went into real-time interactive VR, mostly because of the things we could do and the level of immersion, right? So I'm just going to let this play for a second. I don't know if you've seen it, but generally, I guess a lot of you have understood that virtual reality has this ability to trick our minds into believing that we've actually been in a place, that we've actually had an experience, that we've lived through something. It's not that we've only seen something, it's that there's all these kind of interesting things that are happening. In the many things that we've done, we've always kind of finding these little stories that, we were working with Volvo at some point, and we had a virtual car, and we noticed how everybody stepping outside of the virtual car would always kind of lift their foot to come out of the vehicle, even though there was no real vehicle there. We had these other experiences when there were cables on the floor, and no matter how many times you actually went into that experience, everybody kind of tried to, overstep over the cables that were in there. So your mind is always, tricked into believing that you're actually there. And this is kind of what interested us a lot. So we talk a lot about this idea of placeness out here. It's not our own idea. It's from this guy, Edward Ralph, a theorist and a geographer. And basically, he talks about how you can have a sense of belonging about a place, and how can you have a sense of placeness? So how can you be within an environment that you actually feel certain things about, and then you start generating a connection with it? And this was kind of a key starting point for what we ended up doing. Now, the human brain cannot really register, and that's what I'm basically saying. It can't really register the difference between a realistic VR experience and a real-life experience. And then at the same time, we understand that this is kind of maybe the key to everything. So the sense memory of the brain is the thing that can help us think about, how can we instigate the emotions and the behaviors that we want into our safety training program. So to make it a little bit simple, then when we sat down with Skanska and we went through, many hours of what we want to do and how can we actually achieve it, we said that what we really aim for is to find a way to generate emotions to users. This is the sense of placement, that you're actually going through an experience that means something, that you have emotions from it. And then at the same time, obviously, we wanted to put you in real-life situations. We wanted to create an environment, a construction site, or whatever it is that we wanted to do, that would make you feel that you're really there. And then, basically, like I showed in the beginning, you have to have some sense of having a memory instigated of that. You have to live it, not just read it. So what we try to do then is basically as simple as try to connect to the sense memory, which we believed would basically instigate less risky behavior in the construction environments. So we devised the kind of an equation thinking that, okay, if we give you the knowledge, and if you're making you to experience it, and then we do that repeatedly, that, in theory, should instigate behavior change, right? So this is basically the basic premise of how we started everything. Now, in order to do that, we said you have to believe in what you're doing, in where you are, in what you're seeing. Basically, a little bit of what I've been saying so far. You have to obviously have a story because we're trying to teach you specific things that happen in the construction site. It's not a completely free word. But at the same time, we couldn't really narrate the experience in a way that was limited. It still needed to have a sense of freedom and a sense of reality. And then, of course, we had to create a believable, fully immersive world. So it's, again, the sense memory, the memory in general is what we tried to attack from the beginning. So the difference here was that we actually worked for months around the theory of the whole thing. Of course, we started prototyping stuff that we're going to show you in a minute and how we tried to design the whole thing, but we worked on the theoretical idea of how we can utilize the power of VR to tap into memory systems to then try to change behaviors. Now, sorry, I pressed a little bit too fast. So the idea was that we built a construction site, right, which should resemble, it should create that sense of placeness, so it should, you know, be as similar as we could to a real construction site. So then we visited places, different construction sites from Skanska. We took films, we took pictures, we spoke to people, we saw what's going on there, we did sound recording, so we basically needed to learn what a construction site is like. So this is kind of a first map of how we were basically designing the whole thing in Unity. And then we started adding our story elements into it because we wanted to teach you specific things. So I should also say that we devised a series of scenarios, right? So we wanted to look into road safety in construction sites. We wanted to look into safety relating to working within high environments. We wanted to look into safety with working with certain toxic environments and objects and situations. So we couldn't do it all together. We had to split it up. So this particular story that we're showing you relates very much to the road safety aspect of working within construction environment. And also, statistically, it's one of the highest, you know, the most accidents, in a way, actually happen around road-related issues in construction sites. And construction sites can be massive, right? There's roads within them. There is trucks and construction equipment. They're very often built around actual roads with real traffic, so there's a lot of things going on, and this is kind of a real thing that is going on. So we placed our story elements there, so this is kind of the places we would want you to see or to go or to interact with. And then, basically, we had to give you different ways to do it. So in our particular story, just to make it a little bit more clear, we have a kind of a what was it, like a loader, like an excavator, and then there was a leak, an oil leak, and then basically you had to go find some sand and bring it over to the excavator and stop the leakage. If you didn't stop the leakage, then the oil and the petrol would actually kind of slowly start going into the river. So it was flammable, it was environmental problem, of course, you know, there was all kinds of things going on. So what we needed you to do, again, was to go get the sand, bring it back to the excavator, and stop the leak. But of course, it's not as simple as that, because first of all, you have to find where the sand is. Secondly, you have to find the best way to get to the sand and the best way to bring it back. And then you have to do all that under a condition where, you know, there's unknowns. So there is, first of all, there's people yelling at you, and there's a sense of urgency, and there's noise, and there's machines moving about. And then at the same time, what we did is we gave you multiple paths to this solution. The thing is that most of the paths would actually maim you or kill you. There was only really one right way to do it, and that was the longest and most difficult way to do it. But that's kind of, again, what we're trying to teach you, right? That you have to start thinking smart. You have to start taking your time and behaving appropriately, because if you hurry, if you don't think, then basically you can die or you can get seriously hurt. Now, again, this is kind of how we looked into the paths, right? And I'll explain a little bit more later how this whole thing works. How this thing works too. Okay, so the space we build again, and we'll show you details of that now, is a real construction world. You have the right buildings, you have roads, you have people, you have machines, you have the noises of the place, you have everything. And again, the whole idea, like I said in the beginning, is we place you into a real world. You have a sense of placeness. It feels as real as it possibly can. And then you have behaviors and events and situations that replicate exactly what is going on in the real world. And then if you learn how to behave within that situation and condition, the idea is that maybe when you find yourself in a similar situation into the real world, then you have a memory instigated that actually teaches you, don't rush out into the road, don't rush through there, always look around the road as you cross to see what kind of machines are around you and what can basically happen.
So this was one of the first prototypes we did of the construction site. And as you can see, it's very bright and it's kind of soft and flat colors, and so we started there. We started putting the scale. We put you inside a world and felt like, how big does it need to be? How do you need to where are you in this world, and how big are things? How far can you see? And after that, you can see we started to work a little more with the feeling. So we needed, this is why we are doing this. This is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a feeling in the user, and we try to build a world which is not perfect. We don't want that perfect blue-skied world, the utopian environment. We want a faulty construction site, because there are no perfect construction sites. We wanted to build something that is exaggerated, but still real. So we created this gray, rainy, kind of, you don't feel really good when you're in this environment. And this is where most of the accidents happen. It's not on the blue sky day, it's on the rainy, cold day, where it's bad visibility, and where you're a little rushed to get inside or just carry on with your work. And then we put the user into this. So where do the user go? Where do they end up? Where can they go? Can they go the wrong way? Can they go the right way? Can we guide them in a good way so that because we kind of want them to take the bad way. We want them to experience this maiming and near-death experiences, because that's what instigate the feeling.
Add something to that. Basically, I mean, we took a really long time when we designed the map to understand where people are placed. And again, we revisited construction sites, and we kind of followed people around to see what they do. And we found certain interesting things. So the distances that you had to cross every day. People sometimes need to go around a lot in this construction site, sometimes carrying things, sometimes driving things. So when you design a map, when we go into Unity the first time, and then we just basically, okay, let's say we have defined the kind of objects and things that we want within our world, and then we put them in. The first maps we did were completely out of our own heads. This looks nice. It would be nice to put something there. It would be nice, to make it look this way or the other. But then when you put the camera in and you actually start moving around in this world, it's completely unreal, because it's not only a matter of a one-to-one scale, it's also a matter of behavior. Things within construction sites are never random. There is always environmental safe areas. There is this, in this place, this happens. In this place, this happens. And it's never really one thing. When you have a building, for example, that you're building up and setting up, there is all these other things that are going on around. People have rocks over there, and cement over there, and flammables over there, and this is where they bring new material from. So it's a multi-world. And the distances and the way that you place things around and how you move about is something that perhaps took some of the longest time into how we behave and how we move around these environments. And that's extremely important because, again, we are trying to create this sense of playfulness, because we want you to feel that if this is your training, when you go out into the real world in the construction site, then you kind of remember, hey, I've been here. I kind of know how to behave here. If it was just like a video game map, then it wouldn't actually work. right? So everything that you see is actually replaced and removed and repositioned, and then we kept on walking the distances back and forth and trying to see how this is going to make it feel real. And of course, we had a lot of support from Skanska, so we had a lot of people coming into the site and playing around with the VR, and it was them as well that really helped us to say, okay, this now feels like exactly what my real day situation and my life is like.
Because it's not built for us, it's built for them, and they have a sense of how is a construction site working now, and they need to feel at home and feel like this could be a real construction site.
Yeah. Again, these are just examples of, where we place the people and what we wanted to happen and the different things that are going on, and then, of course, always from the perspective of the user. And, this is, for example, to show you how many steps you have to take to reach a certain point. And we found also that a lot of users in the beginning were kind of confused. They just wanted to hurry up to teleport here and there. So we had to limit the teleportation points in order to create specified paths that we needed you to take. Because throughout all this process, there is sounds and all kinds of things that make it look real. Yeah?
Yeah. And then to that, when we have the user inside of the world, we put the story in. We give you a task. So for this specific task, as Filippos said, it was walking and getting the sand for the leaking excavator and getting back. And this was done while people were shouting at you, stressing you, and you get caught in situations where you really don't want to be on a construction site. So this is one example.
There's a lot of that stuff going on in the experience, like we saw in the beginning. There's multiple paths to be killed or to be hurt, and only one path that you do it right. And the interesting thing is that it was actually Skanska that kept pushing us forward. Like we kept on coming back a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe that's a bit too rough. Maybe that's a bit too scary. And Skanska was like, no, go all in. Like, kill them, hurt them. Have these things, fall on their head, and it was really nice to see as well. I mean, at some point we were even talking about building a container with movable parts that we could basically kind of blind you with a headset and with headphones and just have you walk on moving boards and just try to basically create an even more powerful experience. And maybe in the future, but not yet.
So there's a big difference with reading and hearing about risk and experience them firsthand. So for example, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you wouldn't do that again. And that's what we try to achieve here. We try to achieve that feeling of, I don't want to be in this situation. This is something that could happen to me. It doesn't just happen to people in another country or someone else. It could actually happen to you. And as Filippos said, Skanska was pushing us all the time to be more aggressive towards the user. We were a little bit hesitant, but we actually drew the line at killing. So we do not kill anyone, but we're just like on the edge of that, because we're so that you're near killed, you're near maimed, and as you say, this big concrete block falling just next to you. So we want, the stronger the emotions, the stronger the risk awareness will be in the end. So we try to always just push the line towards that all the time. So to build this, we needed components, and we used a combination of asset store and other places, and built a lot of them ourselves. So this is some of the buildings and work lodging that we did. Everything according to how they look at Skanska. We didn't want a Swedish working place. We didn't want an American working place. We wanted a general place where everyone could come in and feel like this could be my working place.
But at the same time, as close to reality, in their reality as possible.
Exactly. So it's Skanska clothes and Skanska branded and.
Yeah.
And we actually had this. It doesn't seem like a very construction site character, but they actually have a big problem with people that always walks their dog the same path every day, every year, and they don't care about barriers and fences and whatever, they just walk. So they move fences and walk into the construction site with their dogs. So there's actually a person in the construction site walking a dog, and we have this little thing that in the education afterwards, you're asked did you find any small minor faults with this construction site? And the dog walker is one of them, and a person drilling without glasses, and another guy without a helmet is one of them. So we try to connect this with education afterwards to get the right fallout of the whole experience. So you can't really throw someone into a big construction site and expect them to just go crazy in VR. So we needed a starting point. We needed a sort of tutorial. So this is our tutorial. It's the locker room. You're in a confined space. You can feel safe. It's like your locker room at the construction site. And you get the self-awareness there. We have a mirror so you can see who are you in this world. You're started off to put on your safety gear. You have the 4 helmets, which represent different roles at the construction site. We have the foreman, we have the blue-collar worker, we have the office people, and we have the visitors. So you could actually feel that you are the person entering this construction site with your role and your responsibilities.
And it's funny here that we notice that, the people seem to tend to pick up the helmet that related to actually them. So if your real-life situation was wearing a red band, then you would actually always kind of pick the red band. So it, again, goes back into the sense of placeness. You actually feel like you kind of belong here. Before you move away from that story, just very briefly, we also, this was an important part, if you go a step back. It's the whole idea of, we found this an essential part of the whole experience. If you put people into the experience and just throw them in the construction site, it didn't really work. First of all, all of us working with VR, we have the problem of having a huge demographic of people that are completely unfamiliar with the technology. We have nausea issues, we have unfamiliarity issues, we have safety issues, of course, people can trip and get hurt and all other kinds of stuff. So this worked wonders for us because it was, first of all, like Martin said, a safe place. And at the same time, it helped us introduce you to the whole idea. So we taught you how to teleport, we taught you how to grab the controllers, we told you how to do actions, and then we did that in a kind of a safe environment. So once you're ready, once you have set everything up and are putting your clothes and all of that, then you teleport close to the door, you step outside of the door, you see it to the right, and then you're basically immediately outside into the construction site. And this also was great because every other scenario that we will do for Skanska will also start from here. So we have a common starting point, so people will kind of have a reference point to restart. In addition to that, we also, and we don't have that to show because we were not kind of supposed to, but we can talk about it. We use this kind of environment to actually create some additional stories for an event that they had, that we wanted to talk about stories of real people that had been hurt and had been killed into construction equipment. So we use these lockers to actually where people would go and open up and then basically see kind of those related stories. So again, it's always kind of very interesting and good and a smart idea to have some kind of hub that you begin your experience instead of throwing people out straight into the world. Right?
Yeah, and that is a confined space because it feels a little scary to be out in the open immediately. So you might wonder, does it actually work? Is it better to do this than just do surveys or regular training? And we have done a survey with everyone who's tested the experience, and actually 92% has had a positive impact immediately after the experience. And that's a super number, but it's also not really anything that's good unless you have a sustained sense of impact. And 73% says they have a lasting positive impact. So it is actually a really, really good number for us to see that they feel themselves that this has done differences for their working life. And we can see that in other cases too, like the numbers from all the research in this area are getting better and better, and we feel that this is the right way to go in any way where it's an economical situation, where it's a safety situation, where it's hard to train people in situations that you can't put them in real life. So
and what Skanska did as well is, in the beginning when we first started working with this, the HTC Vive was probably the best and most available headset you could have. So they started building this kind of safety centers around Sweden and elsewhere that they would have to bring people in. and take them through those training programs. But now that we start having the autonomous headsets, you know, the Quest and everything else, then this actually grows and becomes a lot easier because you can start running those experiences portably, which means you can have a whole other level of access into your employees and your staff and basically kind of create more and distribute it more easily, which is, of course, another big issue. That you have. So in general, you know, the technology development is actually an evolution, is actually helping us a lot with those safety training programs.
Yeah, it's not the visual fidelity and the high-def content that is most important. It's the awareness and sense of placement in the experience and the feelings you get. So we actually tend to move more and more into standalone headsets to be able to get more people in and through this instead of having them to go to big VR centers that they build in a few places around Sweden, but instead they can come to the construction site, they can do it in their own space, and they could get 1,500 a year through this instead of 100 or times 10. Yeah. But it's a very important aspect.
So to kind of try to, you know, put everything together to make sense, this was perhaps the most important point for us. It's to create a world that you feel that you understand, that you feel that you belong, that you feel that you understand, and then every experience you have within it, so the training you have within it can actually tap into that memory, that sense memory, and then basically instigate a behavior change. This is kind of the whole idea. And what's really interesting here is that, you know, we keep talking about this idea. This is Borges, like a long time ago, spoke about this idea of a mirror world. So he thought that we can create a map, a one-on-one map of every single thing and place into of the real world, right? So now, all these years later, we're basically kind of, we think, moving into this territory, and I'll explain how. I mean, we are now, you know, we spoke a lot about how VR is going to develop, and, you know, there were all these original projections in the beginning about where we will be in 2020, and of course, you know, things haven't exactly worked as we predicted in the very beginning, but it's happening. We're now moving up. I mean, VR is taking, and AR are taking a whole other role in our lives, and we're past through the age of hype and moving into the age of value when it comes to these technologies. And what we're basically doing is we're creating this kind of one-to-one map. We're building our world to, you know, around AR and VR. And what I kind of mean here is that, you know, the Skanska experience in a way is a mirror world, is a one-to-one representation where you can virtually create a real-world environment and step into it and have real-world experiences. Our map of the Skanska construction site is a one-to-one mirror world of the real one. In the same way that, you know, with AR, you all understand that we're using our mobiles and every other device to, you know, understand where we are, where we're going, where the restaurant we want to go to is. So we're using these kind of technologies to basically come into this world, into this mirror world. And this is kind of the first stepping stones into that idea. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we have 10 or a little more time for questions. There is, they tell me, 2 microphones, so if anybody wants to have any questions, we have plenty of time to talk, but you would need to go to the microphones and talk.
Or if you want to come back up afterwards and talk, that's fine too.
That was excellent. Thank you very much. Talked a little bit about motion sickness and nausea. How did you mitigate against that with such a large population go through this VR experience?
Yeah, so what we've been usually doing in our experiences has been to keep you in one space, like in a 4x4 meter, and let you roam around in that space. That didn't work in this case because we are in a big construction site. So we did a regular teleport with just a frame and move no like animation or frames in between. So it has worked really great. It had, as Filippos said, the demographic, the construction workers are not really tech savvy. It's not like they have their own VR headset at home. So they're not really, and not gamers usually either. But it has worked a lot, really good, and with the little locker room in the start to get the sense of how do because in the locker room you see the controls in your hand. So you have been able to show them how it works, and we haven't had any reports of nausea actually, so it's been really good.
We find that is actually more common usually when you're moving in a vehicle or something like that. Most cases that's kind of where we get nausea issues in other projects. But here when you can move freely, then it wasn't really
and a
issue.
non-instigated movement. Like if you're moved by the computer or we move a user without them knowing it, that's a different thing. Now that they are actually taking the action themselves to go to a specific place, they know where the place is, and they're just there. It's easier for the brain to get that.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a follow-up question to that. How do you handle time-critical movement? So if you have, say, 30 seconds to pick up the sand.
There's no time limitations in the experience. There's people move about and they're stressed by the foreman yelling like hurry up, but there's no real time limitations. You can walk around in your pace, but people tend to stress a little bit anyways. But it usually takes around 5 minutes to finish the experience from start to finish.
We have some cases where people who do everything wrong and are almost hit by the bus, are almost getting hurt by everything falling on them, and there's another scene of rocks we didn't show that are falling off a track, then they're kind of stepping out because they become very disorientated, and then time becomes a little irrelevant. But we kind of think this is a part of the success of the whole experience. And then, of course, like I said in the beginning, the idea of repetition is what would instigate the memory. So then you calm down, think a little bit, and then do it again.
Yeah, we have had situations where they actually have dropped out because of being really, really frightened or really emotional disturbed by it. And that's not a good thing, but it's also a good thing because that's what we want to raise in the users. We want to raise that awareness. We want to have them be emotional afterwards. We don't want them to laugh and be happy and say this was a fun thing, because it shouldn't supposed to be a fun thing. It should be a learning experience.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I really like the visual style, I have to say. My question is a little bit related. The number is 73%. Have you got any idea how you're going to sort of raise that?
Not yet. This is so early, so there's only a limited set that we have these numbers from. It's like 100 persons that did the survey, but I think just getting more and more people involved and getting also the white collar workers getting there, because we did a little locker in the locker room about stress, which was very good for them, because it's more part of their daily life than the construction site per se. So I think getting more people involved and learning from them and getting feedback, I think that could go quite far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have one more.
Yeah.
About punishment and reward. Have you any thoughts about which work better, to sort of success or something, or get killed?
It's a very good question. We never actually thought of it this way. It seems like if you do it right, then you would probably know how to behave and can think clearly in these kind of situations. But I think, at least from my experience, the statistic of people getting it right is very, very low. Especially when we started, because in the beginning we didn't have all the stress factors in place. So, slowly it became darker, faster, more noisy, and that seems to actually work in disorientating people. And so there's no clear answer, but I think most people actually will have to go through the motions and see the danger around and actually get hurt a little bit.
And a lot of cases, we're not allowing them to take the right route. So we need them to get this feeling. We need them to know that I don't want to be in this place. I want to be there. So we force them to take the wrong turns, even though they know it, and we instigate that feeling inside of them, because it wouldn't, like someone just walking around and doing the right thing wouldn't really give anything. It would be just I did a VR thing, and it's not really what we're about. So
Yeah, and one of the next things we're exploring now is, like I said in the beginning, with working within height, working in very high environments, and then, you know, of course, people are naturally kind of very careful, because this is something that's a lot more instigated in us, to be careful when we're in a very high environment, that we can fall and die. So then we're actually probably going to script events too, because we need to throw you out, because we need that fear instigated in you to remember what it's like. Otherwise,
or
everybody
a board
can
just
yeah.
cracking, or like
Exactly.
near deaths we want to achieve. And there's a regular crosswalk in the experience with the signal, and I think it's like 95% that just walk straight out into the road, even though everyone knows exactly how that crosswalk works, but they need to walk out, almost getting hit by a car, walk back, press the button, and then walk over. So people will make mistakes, and we force them to do some too.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, so my question is in regards to the dark weather and cold that you had to make people make mistakes. Have you had any experiments in actually having like a cold room or wind or something, or is it only audio and visual?
Yeah, it's just a visual thing, and audio with the rain sounds. I think we come quite far with that. I think the accessibility for the users and on the construction site is more important than that extra sense of cold, or because people feel kind of cold. Even though there's no chill in the room, they feel cold when they go into the experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question about the learning effect. Do you have only one scenario they play through and no data about how they learn, or do you have data about how good the learning effect really is? Because as I understood it, it was more like, did the person enjoy the experience, or did they think they learned something, or what is your experience with the recurring effect?
We have just one experience running live at the moment. More are in development, but the data is limited. But there's just questions to the users about how do you think this experience raised your awareness of risks, and this was sent out 4 months after they did the experience. So it was more like, did you feel how much more risk aware were you directly after the experience, and how much more risk aware are you now due to that? So it's more a self-conscious thing about from the users.
Okay, perfect.
We also have a thing where we sometimes ask people if they have noticed certain things that are going on that are actually a little bit irrelevant to the story. And then we notice their awareness level on everything going on around them. So this, I think we're kind of still developing exactly how to get learnings from it as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, so I'm a licensed architect, recently turned game developer in VR, and I really appreciate what you're doing. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Especially creating that sense of placeness. I think it's really, really valuable. So my question kind of piggybacks on the previous one. If you are looking into any other ways to implement that mimicry using devices like the Woodger Vest that has the haptic feedback, or the Feel Real multi-sensory mask that has the smells, so you could really kind of drive home these other experiences on the construction site where someone maybe bumps into you and you feel it, or you smell something odd, and so you know to direct your attention to something like that.
Yeah, I think it could be really interesting to do that down the line. But at the moment, as I said, these guys or girls at the construction sites are not really tech savvy. So I think like just the impressions from putting on a VR headset is quite immense. And that's why we try to be gentle and soothe them into the experiences. So I think getting a lot of equipment on you would be a little counterproductive. I think when they go a little more consumer-based and a little easier to access, then I think it's a different thing. But right now we're just using the audio-visual effects to achieve that, the placeness.
Thank you.
I would love to know how you handle people who are not capable of using virtuality. I think it's always a bad situation when certain employees don't have the opportunity to participate because of medical reasons or so on. I would love to know how you handle it or how your client handle those people.
I can't speak for Skanska. The experience per se works perfectly well if you're disabled or in a wheelchair. But for people who are stereoscopic blind or for whatever reason can't use the VR, this is just a part of a full day training. So this is a 5-minute part. So they would still participate in the rest, but maybe not do the full VR. They would discuss it and maybe see it on screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
So, hi. The safety training at my company includes a video of the death of a person who is electrocuted and burned alive. So, you are not killing the user, but do your users see somebody die? Would that be productive?
I don't think you kind of need to build a relationship to that character, and we don't have that time really to do that. I think you will get a lot more risk awareness from being exposed to things yourself, because you're always yourself's best friend, or how do you say? Like you're always going to look out for yourself the most, and not maybe a random character in a VR experience. So I don't know. It could take the step over to a macabre situation. But then again, we have been pushed into macabre situations before, so I don't know. It could. We have had a lot of ideas about being blind, because there's a lot of people doing the cutting like cement without using the protective glasses, and having a little particle fly into your eye and closing one of the displays could be a really powerful thing. But we haven't tested out doing it to others in the experiences.
Because I think the shock factor would be useful.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right.
Is it publicly available, or do you plan to make it publicly available?
It's just for Skanska personnel at the moment, so they don't want anyone going into the experience knowing what will happen, so they try to limit the amount of talk around it. They won't be able to keep it on the down low when they reach more and more of their employees, but it's not publicly available. No, only the cases. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks
and
very much.
Come up if you want to talk or.
Thanks.
Thanks.